It could be, oh man, I can't believe I wasted all that time. I really don't care anymore. I'm going to move on or do something else. When is it simply not worth it to struggle and fight and to establish a new order? If you really care about something, you're actually going to bring improvement to both the quality and the substance of any and every activity you do. You see, that's what the enlightened master knows. And it's nothing special. It's simply uniqueness. Each and every one of us has the potential to polish the mirror that is our consciousness into reflecting something greater than has ever been imagined before. Hello there, and welcome to the show. We're talking human design today. Generator, depression, and you. So whether or not you are a generator or a type, whether or not you have this defined sacral center, I believe this video can benefit you if you're looking to either honor and respect who you are and your nature in this life, or if you're looking to honor and respect and support or provide guidance to somebody who is a generator. So if you don't know anything about human design, my name is Ian, and I love to help people get in touch with these mechanics and expand their awareness. And the key way we do that in human design is by deconditioning from the not self. And so a key factor about the not self is that the not self can easily be depressed. I believe it has nothing to do with the true self. True depression is basically a factor of life when you're not honoring your direction, when you're not honoring what you are here to do. And so with the generator type, this can be very obvious in that sense, because the generator is here to be a part of the generation of the frequency of physical reality. The generator is here to either be bringing in frustration into this plane, which is the distorted frequency, and depression is basically a form of that frustrated frequency, frustration at the inability to move forward into the next step for so long that eventually it becomes depression. Like, oh, I can't move on to the next stage, and I don't even believe I can. Why am I even here? Why is life worth living? I don't think it is, and therefore I'm depressed. And that's what we're here to decondition from. Because when a generator is satisfied in their life, when a generator is truly happy, they're able to experience a generation and regeneration of their energy that allows for the fulfillment of their purpose in this life, that allows them to either deepen their mental awareness, it allows them to build things here on the material plane, it allows them to engage in deeply satisfying personal relationships, and it allows them to answer this big question of, what am I going to do with my life? I know I'm only here temporarily, and what am I going to make of this? And fundamentally, it is the lack of movement towards any of those four directions that I mentioned. This mental expansion, physical expansion, relational expansion, and the answer to the question of, why am I here on this plane? If you're not moving towards any of those directions, you could easily feel depressed because you're not moving towards your purpose in this life, your mission, why you're actually here. I've been in my human design experiment for about 6 years or so. I love talking about this stuff. It has radically transformed the way in which I approach life. And as a result, I've felt more satisfaction. I've felt less frustration. And I felt like this little thing called the inner child on the inside of me has actually come back alive. And so it's why I love to talk about this stuff, because on the off chance that sharing this knowledge with you could help your inner child come back to life if you have lost it, then all the fumbling and tumbling I do around myself to get this knowledge out, as a third line, I'm here to trial and error my way through the material plane and to fall up 100 times and get up 101 times. To continuously get back up and try it again from another angle and another angle and another angle. And so the fundamental nature of this generator, the key signature vibration, is that of satisfaction. And you see, the thing is, so many of us don't experience enough of that. So many of us generators are caught in a loop of frustration instead. This is the distorted vibration for the generator. And it's my deepest hope that by sharing this knowledge, I can help to dissolve some of that frustration into the joyous light of satisfaction that I know is possible because, ooh, yeah, it feels so good. And so I'd like to preface this by saying simply that this is my interpretation of the human design knowledge. For you see, each person who actually dives into this knowledge and begins to live from inner authority and type strategy, there is a revolution that happens from the inside out. There is a shift that occurs in one's life. And as a result of that shift, each person becomes aware of the truth in their own way, and so each person brings their own unique spin on the knowledge. And so my interpretation differs a little bit from Ra'uruhu and his interpretation. He was the original founding manifester of human design. And so my deepest honors and appreciations for his work, and I'd like to further it in my own way. So without further ado, let's hop on in. So here we're looking at a body graph with the mandala wheel surrounding it. This is basically the main picture for all of human design that shows a person about their map for differentiation, the potential to become different. This is basically an imprint given at the moment of birth that shows that map for the potential of becoming different. And so by trusting the inner authority and the type strategy, that potential for difference becomes the guiding force in the life. And no longer is one living a life that other people could have lived, one is beginning to live a life that only they could experience. Which is truly magnificent. Or not, you know? I mean, each person is unique. Each person has their own interpretation and perspective on what is going on. And I don't want to overwrite somebody's reality. I simply want to share my perspective. So basically what we're looking at here, surrounding all this stuff, these are all the gates. There are 64 different gates of human design. They come from the ancient Chinese I Ching. And they surround the outside of this wheel as a representation of the zodiac. This is the cosmic forces all around us. And then here on the inside, we have the body graph. This body graph right here on the inside has those same 64 gates. You might notice when I'm hovering over things, we have highlights. Right here in the very middle is what's called the G center. This is what houses something called the magnetic monopole, which holds us together in our illusion of separateness and moves us along our line of geometry. And I don't want to get too far into all this mystical stuff. I'm aiming towards being practical about what it means to be a sacral generator, or an emotional generator, or a manifesting generator. Because what happens down here is that we have the sacral center. Now this energy center is the generative force of life. This is where life energy is actually born in that sense, and this is where it rests and regenerates into the new day's energy resource. And basically what it means is that generators need to use up their energy correctly so that they can properly sleep at night, and so that they can properly rest and regenerate and wake up for a new day tomorrow with energy to go at it again. And fundamentally, if the generator is not using their energy correctly, they're probably going to have problems sleeping. They could easily have all kinds of different health problems show up, and they can easily become depressed. And so that's the primary theme of what we're talking about today, this orientation around the sacral center and the potential for depression. Because we don't have to be depressed. We don't have to be experiencing this stuff all the time. You know, a little bit of sadness or a little bit of melancholy or sorrow, this is natural in life. This is perfectly okay. This is part of life. However, chronic depression, I don't mean to diagnose or to treat or cure anything. What I mean to do is to educate and share information. And when the sacral center is using its energy correctly, you know what you're feeling? You're feeling satisfaction. Period. If you are being who you're meant to be as a generator, you are going to be feeling satisfied with that. You're not going to be experiencing so much frustration that then represses itself into a depression because you imagine you can't ever be satisfied and there's no reason to be here. And so you might notice that from this red sacral square here, that there are a few black lines coming out connecting to different energy centers. Here we have the emotional center. Here we have the root center. Here we have the splenic center. Here we have the G center. And here we have the throat center. Now, each one of these energy centers connected to the sacral have their own themes about them and their own nature. Our primary focus today is to dive into each one of these channels and the gates that come from the sacral and get in touch with the primary response mechanisms in life for the generator. Because there are countless different types of generators. After all, each person is utterly unique in their own way. However, there are fundamental surface level generic mechanics that I can share so that we can get in touch with the basics before we start getting into the endless infinite nuance of each individual person, which is really the purpose of a private session. However, this is for getting in touch with the mechanics of what it means to be a generator. And so I'll begin with this channel called the 952 right here between the sacral and the root on the right hand side. This channel is all about concentration. This channel, the 952, is the logical format energy of concentration. This brings intensity of focus to dig into the details and go step by step by step by step, on and on and on and on and on, with the end goal of the logical circuitry being to perfect the pattern of life. Which is a bit of a joke because of the mutation, which we'll get into next, and I'll talk about that soon. The key factor is that life is changing. So even if we perfect the pattern in the moment, well, it might change tomorrow, and we have to perfect a new pattern. And so it could be pretty funny to be caught up in these things. And that's the sick joke of the mind. Now, if you'll notice here, this sacral center is not connected to each and every single other energy center on the body graph. Over here is the heart center, over here is the ajna center, and over here is the head center. Now, the head supplies pressure to the ajna to conceptualize, to think in one way or another. While this heart center is the ego, and it's the willpower. These are not directly tied or connected with the sacral center. We can make some inferences about this, and there's even a mystical statement about the heart center and the sacral. If we had the heart with direct connection to the sacral, we would be able to live forever. For the willpower would have a direct relationship with the generation, regeneration of life itself, and you could live as long as you want. However, that's not part of being human. That's not part of what we are. We live as long as we're meant to live. Not a moment longer, not a moment shorter. And so another nugget about this is the fact that there's no direct connection to the ajna or the head center. So it means that the natural life force does not have a thinking process about it. You know, I mean, it's quite fascinating. We think that, well, we might think that life is thinking about things. However, life in general is not. This thinking process is very much a human process, and it's part of what allowed us to dominate the material plane. is that we started to imagine the future, and we were able to remember the past in the present. From this moment, we were able to look around and to remember the past, imagine the future, and then to communicate the difference, to communicate what we have learned from the past. Oh, don't do that, that's dangerous. And we were able to say, well, if you do this and I do this and they do that, then we can go forward in this certain way. And so that was the way of our ancestors, is that this ajna center dominated. However, it's no longer the point of all this concentration that I'm bringing to the table right now. The ajna is simply here to measure, it's here to observe, and it's here to communicate. It has no direct connection with the life force itself. So down here in the sacral center, we have the 952. And what is the 9 about? Well, this 9th gate is the gate of focus. Boom, we have the gate of focus. This is taming of the small. This is the ability to work with the tiny little pieces that build up step by step and make something great. It says potential can be fulfilled through detailed attention to all potential aspects. And so what is the foundation of this 9th gate? Well, we would look at line number 1, right here. This is sensibility, a well-balanced and responsible approach to problem solving. This is the very foundation of the format of concentration, which is what gives us logic as a collective process that we can share with one another with the intention of building a better future. We need to have a balanced and responsible approach to problem solving. This is the only way in which we can actually build logical foundations that can take us to the next level. So immediately we can see that if you're not bringing sensibility to your logic as a 952, if you're not bringing balanced and responsible approaches to your problem solving, you could find yourself depressed because you're getting caught up in things that don't matter, or you're getting caught up in holding on to something that is not actually good for you, or you're getting caught up in amplifying some kind of emotional thing from somebody else and trying to avoid the problems. And all of that could lead to depression in a chronic situation, which is why we need to have this balanced and sensible approach. This is the foundation of all logic in that sense. Now the second line, this is misery loves company. We're seeing the shadow self right here show up in this second line. This is that, well, we've got caught up in things that we don't like because we're kind of like naturally moving. We have things that we're distasteful of. We have things that we don't really tolerate. And if we can get together about things that we don't tolerate, then we can enjoy each other's company of, oh, I really don't like that. And oh, yeah, that's so gross. That's so bad. What about this? And oh, I don't like that at all either. And people can relish in that sense of what they don't appreciate together. How saddening that can be. Because in the light, there's this potential to discover and experience the contagious joy that is available when we focus in on the details, when we have this ability to see all these little things and how they work together. Well, you know what? Wow, joy loves company as well. Joy can also be alone without issue. Line number 3 is the straw that breaks the camel's back. This is actually the line that I'm bringing to the table right here and now and every day of my life. I was given this from birth. It's actually quite a funny thing to have with me, for I have directly experienced so many different little moments in my life. Like the line here is that the overlooked minor element that always predetermines failure. And so I've had countless experiences where there was something I didn't notice or something that slipped my mind, and boom, it comes right back to slap me across the face, and I lost, or I had a failure experience. I had a learning experience of, oh, that's still important. Even though it slipped my mind, it's still important. Because the nature of this third line, there's a desirous nature of the three. There is this locking on mechanism. And in this case, there is a locking on to a detail or details. And in such a hyper-focus, hyper-fixation on a detail, well, I could lose sight of other details. And so in the not-self, this becomes deeply, deeply suffering. This is very frustrating and upsetting to, oh, I knew better. I know better than that. How could I forget that? Like earlier today, I actually started this recording. I recorded for an hour doing this talk I'm doing right now, only to discover I had my microphone muted for that whole hour. And so now I'm here speaking again to the same things I've already done in a new way. And in the not self, that frustration could hold me back. It could be, oh man, I can't believe I wasted all that time. I really don't care anymore. I'm going to move on or do something else. However, I don't let that hold me back. This is the nature of the third line, is that in truth, the third line gets back up again and goes for it from another angle, from another approach, getting closer and closer and closer to the way in which things really work. And so I'm okay with having lost that hour of time, because it's simply life. I was meant to have that experience as far as I'm concerned. That's part of my acceptance as a third line, is to be able to have a resignation, have an acceptance that, yep, that happened. It's okay. I can get up and try again. And that allows me to not be depressed in this life, because I do get up and try again, and I learn every time. Moving beyond line 3, we have line 4. This is dedication, you see? This is regardless of the pressures or stress, the disciplined attention to detail. So something about the fourth line is different from the third line, in that the fourth line is really interested in what's going on at the other end of the spectrum, on the other side, what the other person is thinking, feeling, doing. And so this is a deep attunement in that sense to the world around them in the nature of other human beings. This is in touch with their network. And so regardless of the pressures or the stress from the network, this fourth line has the dedication to pay attention to all the little details and push through, to get that message throughout the network and to do their work. The fifth line is the line of faith, the trust that detailed adherence will lead to fulfillment. So here in line 5, we're dealing with universal practicality. That's the light of what we hope to see from the fifth line. And that's why it's called faith. By having detailed adherence, by focusing in on these details and being present with all the little things as they fall, there is this faith that the big picture will be fulfilled, one step at a time, through all these practical little details. Moving beyond the fifth line, we have the sixth line. This is gratitude, the joy which comes with accepting small rewards for small victories. You see, the sixth line takes a totally different approach from the rest of what's going on. Line 1, 2, and 3 are pretty self-absorbed. They're into their own little world. Line 4 is interested on the other side, the other person. Line 5 is receiving so much expectation from the other that they could lose sight of themselves, and so they must be practical in a universal sense. Now line 6 has to take all of that which has been learned from the previous 5 lines and repackage it into the next step. into the next stage of evolution, into the next gate, clockwise along the mandala wheel. And so this is about gratitude. This is about accepting, oh, I did a little thing here and I got a little thing there, you know? Bit by bit, this is finding that objective perspective that, yes, little things are worth it. It is little things that build up and accumulate into something great. And so that's the channel of concentration. These people with the format energy of concentration, this 952 channel like me, we have a sacral yes for opportunities in life that allow us to concentrate, places where we can bring our intensity. Such as with these readings, I'm able to explore the farthest reaches of my mind and body in this moment by exploring my concentration and sharing the logic of what I have learned with you. And our next channel is another format energy. This is the format of the 360, here in the center between the sacral and the root. This 360 is the format energy of the pulse. This is the format of individuality. This is also the source of melancholy. For you see, in the pulse, there is a pulse that whoosh goes through, and whoosh it goes through, and whoosh it goes through, or nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. Nothing is happening. And often they get caught up in nothing is happening, and they can feel melancholic about that, which is different from depression. In melancholy, there is the capacity to find amusement, to find creativity within the bittersweet reality that each individual has found themselves within, you know? There's always beauties and there's always sorrows. There's always horrors and there's always wonder. And this is part of life. There is this full spectrum, big picture, and the individual can become caught up in that and feel melancholic. And so that's not a problem. That's no issue. Melancholy can become great creativity because all of a sudden, whoosh, there's a pulse coming through, something is happening, and they can take hold of that. They can ride the lightning into a brand new format, into a brand new energy, into a brand new way of being. This is the strike of lightning that starts fire. And then, whoa, hey, we've got fire. Look at this, everyone. And so for these people, being able to accept that it's either happening or it's not. And when it's not happening, that's okay. Because fundamentally, if they let their mind control their life and make all the decisions for them, then when nothing's happening, it can become the end of the world. Well, nothing is happening. I don't think anything is ever going to happen. And if they're really listening to their mind and they're thinking about their thinking about their thinking about their thinking about their thinking, then they won't even notice when something happens because they're too busy projecting upon the world that nothing is happening. And they can become depressed because they've lost sight of the truth. They've lost sight of who and what they are. And so what is the nature of this yes? This yes is here to say yes to mutation. It's here to say yes to something new. A person with a 360 will only really ever say yes to a circumstance or a place or a thing. They will only get that, yes, I'm going towards this thing, if there is the chance and the opportunity to bring mutation, to bring something new into the field or into one's experience. And so what is the foundation of that? Well, let's take a look at gate number 3 and scroll on down to the first line. We have synthesis. Difficulties can be only overcome when all the pertinent factors have been analyzed. Now, isn't that interesting? You see these melancholic people that can get hopefully not caught up in nothing's happening and they lose sight of when something does. The hope is that they're paying attention. The hope is that they're paying attention to the details that matter so that they can put them together when something is happening and create a brand new order. For the title of this gate is ordering. This is difficulty at the beginning. And the foundation of this difficulty at the beginning is that in the beginning we need to synthesize something new, something fresh. And what happens after we've synthesized this brand new thing? Well, we have immaturity in the second line. This is the unrestrained acceptance of guidance. This is not necessarily immaturity in the way we think of immaturity in the first sense. Like, oh, this is ignorance. Well, yes and no. The unrestrained acceptance of guidance, when you literally don't know any better, not that you ever had the chance to know any better, which makes a big difference. This is a brand new mutation, a brand new form, a brand new way of living, being, thinking that is going, oh, well, okay, I'll try this. I'll try that. You think so? Well, let's go for it. Because it's difficult at the beginning. The natural order for this is to try it out. Like, oh, well, I don't know what's going to work. Let's see. And what happens after that? We have the third line, this material plane of survival, the ability to recognize and distinguish between fertile and sterile in their various manifestations. So this third line is deeply about the material plane on the world. This is the physical stuff, the atoms and the particles, the chairs, the desks, the televisions, the people, the cars driving around, the animals, the birds, and the bees. And how does a person with this third line go about? Well, they have to survive. This is the material plane of either life and death. And how do we continue? How do we actually create an order from the beginning that can fulfill itself? Well, it has to be fertile. You must be able to go forward and multiply. You must be able to make more. Because as we said earlier, there is no ego to sacral connection. There is no eternal life in these bodies. These vehicles don't live forever. So if you can't make more, if you're not fertile, then there is no order. There is simply an impending end. And so this survival is not only about individual survival. It's about survival of the next individual and the next individual. Because we need to know what is fertile from what is sterile, what cannot continue, what can only have its own limited experience and then it's gone. And we need to be able to break the bond from that, to let go of, okay, this mutation doesn't work. This new technique, it's sterile. It doesn't actually work. It can't go forward. And so we break the bond with that. And what do we do after that? We come across the fourth line of charisma. This is the innate quality which attracts valued guidance. You see, here now, we're looking at a different order of guidance. We're looking at the innate nature that is here to attract guidance that is truly valuable. Because this fourth line, as we've mentioned earlier, this fourth line is deeply attuned to the other person. It's very interested in the other person and all the other people and what's going on in this social world. And as a result of that, it's charismatic. It's attracting the energy that goes, oh, hey, I think you would be good at this. Like, oh, hey, what about if we go over here? And so in the true self, when this person is able to trust their yes, then they can receive that valued guidance and benefit from it. When this person is too busy thinking about thinking, they don't have access to valued guidance. Because somebody gives it to them and they think with immaturity that it's not the truth, that it's not valuable. They get caught up in nonsense, and then eventually they feel depressed and burnt out because they've tried so hard and they've kept trying because, they're charismatic. So they're around people, they love to be around people, and they keep getting caught up in the nonsense. All because of the thinking mind being trusted for making decisions, which in my argument is the primary cause of all depression and all distorted vibrations. It's listening to this thinking thing up here as if it knows what to do. God. And what comes after charisma? We have victimization in the fifth line. When actions designed to overcome confusion alienate others. So here we have a shadow, the universalized principle for the ordering and the difficulty in the beginning. Is that difficulty in the beginning trying to find its order? It has a challenge at being practical. And it has this tendency to become a victim of its own potential and expectations others have placed upon it. You see, these actions are designed to overcome confusion, and they end up alienating other people. And then this fifth line, this hero, this savior, becomes a heretic. They become hated and despised. No, you don't actually deliver on what I thought you were. You have this beautiful veneer of, confidence that you can synthesize something brand new. And yet in reality, you don't know what you're talking. That's what happens to the fifth line. When the fifth line can't be practical, it so easily becomes a heretical and victimized state. And that's why they really need to trust their gut. They need to be able to trust their sacral for making decisions and not that thinking mind. Because in trusting that gut, the joke here is that if they alienate others, it could even be alienating people that are bad to be around them. It could be pushing away negative influences so that when they share a practical solution overcoming force, there are those who can truly recognize, hey, I see how valuable that is. Next up, we have the line number 6. This is the line of surrender. This is the ultimate maturity to recognize when struggle is futile. When is it simply not worth it to struggle and fight and to establish a new order? When is a mutation sterile and it could never be fertile? When is it simply not worth it? That's what this line 6 is here to recognize and to surrender to accept that some battles can never be won and they're not worth fighting for. And the only way that this 6th line can realize that is through the nature of being a 6th line. For you see, line number 6 goes through a 3-stage process wherein they develop through the lines of the body graph or through the lines of a gate before approaching the 6 for real, popping off and becoming the 1 of the next gate. And so how they do that is by trial and erroring for 30 years. Then they have 20 years to develop the personal individual truth, to get out of the subjectivity of all their trial and error, get into the objectivity of their perspective, and formulate a new truth that then they will either be hypocritical about, which was the old way, the mentally dominated, purely strategic way of do as I say and not as I do, which is deeply infertile, and it's not a worthwhile mutation. And they can transform that into, now I am here to walk my talk. I can literally talk and walk at the same time, and you can see it, and they can see it, everybody can see it, you can see it from a mile away. I don't even have to tell you. I don't need to advertise at all. I'm simply here to be myself. And you can tell from a mile away there's something different. And that's the nature of this 6th line. They have that potential to so deeply surrender that not only can they recognize when struggle is futile, they can recognize when the struggle is worth it, and they can fight for it, and they can go for it, and they can be noticed for it. And others will follow in the wake. Others will be able to see, whoa, that's a good way. Look at that. Look at what they're doing. I like that. Such is the nature of a 6th line. Either the role model or the hypocrite. For you see, the role model is what makes us nine-centered human beings. See these energy centers here, the head center, the ajna center, the throat center, the G center, the heart center, the solar plexus, the root, the spleen, and the sacral center, our focus of today. We have these 9 energy centers. This is the evolution that took place in 1781. Before then, prior to that year, we were as if the 7-centered classical yoga Brahmanic chakra alignment system, where it was this linear vertical tower of 7 chakras, one on top of the other. And then 1781 occurred. There was an evolution. The mind, the ajna, the third eye was no longer number 1. It was no longer the newest top dog evolutionary awareness center. It is now taking a back seat to the solar plexus. The solar plexus right here is beginning to develop awareness. And it gives us the potential for emotional awareness that goes beyond all of our ancestors. They could never even imagine what this was like. Maybe some of them could. I don't want to dismiss them all. However, in the general parlance, this is where Stoicism came from. It came out of this ajna dominance of our ancestors when we had only 7 energy centers. And the 6th-line being could only be a hypocrite at best. And I believe this is why, if you look into the history of mystical or spiritual or religious traditions, that's all we see. That's all I see when I look into their history. Everywhere, all of them, they're hypocrites. Sure, there's mythological figures, there's Buddha, there's Christ, there's Moses. There's these forces that are mythological, and it's harder to find the hypocrisy from them. And yet, here we are in this moment. We don't have to live based on only their word. We can go beyond them. Even Christ said, all of this and more you can do. And before even them, before we had this capacity to conceptualize and think about the this and the that, the past and the future within the present, before we had that access, the splenic center was the dominant awareness on this planet. And if I look at it technically, there's actually many, 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 many more units of splenic awareness on this planet. This spleen is the fundamental survival awareness. This is cleansing of the body so that the body can continue to live and survive. These are the basic fundamental fears of survival in the moment. And we share this center of awareness with all the living forms other than the single-celled organism. And we'll talk more about them soon. And in this moment, that splenic center connects us with the birds, the bees, the insects, the reptiles, the trees, the mammals. This is right now awareness. Going all the way back, I think 90,000 years ago. 90,000 years ago is when this format of the human being evolved. So this was back when we were basically Neanderthals, when we didn't think about the past or the future. We were like the animals in the garden, and we simply existed. We lived. We didn't have the capacity to think about things and to make up stories and to make up rules. We simply lived in the world, and we were of the world. That was all it was, It was perfect harmony with nature. And then evolution happened, and the 7-centered being was born. This ajna chakra became dominant. We started to think about the past and the future. And we created so much suffering, so much depression, simply for the purpose of domination and for the purpose of truly expanding our conscious awareness and evolving through time-space experiences. And I don't want to diminish any of this. Every single step along the way has been incredibly valuable. And the deepest magic is what's available in the present moment, what's available today and tomorrow, going forward into the future. And that is this potential for the solar plexus to truly become aware. This is a mutation, I believe, is fertile. This is a mutation we can carry forward, and that'll be very exciting. Taking a step back into the practical, as we're talking about these channels from the sacral and what we're here to respond to. If we do not respond to what we are here to respond to, well, we're probably frustrated for one, we're upset about things not going the way that they're supposed to. We're upset that we can't move on to the next level. And if we get caught up in the inability to move on to the next level, we're stuck at the same place and we think we can't move up in the world or move on to the next stage. We can get depressed. And so we have one more format energy down here. This is the 4253 from the sacral to the root. This gives the cyclical abstract format energy. And this energy is here to make sense of the past. Where you see the logical on the other side is all about projecting into the future. This abstract on the left is all about making sense of the past. This ability to go through an experience from the beginning into the middle, all the way to the highest height and the fruition of completion. The end of the process, the final stage. This is what the human experience is all about. At least it's part of it. And so this 4253 is about cyclical processes. This is about going around and around and around and around in the spiral as we get closer and closer to the next stage. And something about this is the nature of contemplation upon past experience. This is the real key for the abstract person. For you see, this nature of abstraction is pulling golden nuggets out of what has already happened. This is making sense of the past so that there is something to share going forward into the future. The abstract loves telling stories. And they can tell stories because they've pulled a golden nugget out of the past that can then be abstracted and pulled into a specific story. You can have parables and metaphors for all kinds of different ways in the life. And so how does this cyclical process work? What is the foundation of the yes for this process? Well, this is line 1, diversification. The very foundation of the abstract process is that we need diversification. We need a wide variety of differences in order to actually eventually culminate in completion. Because this 4253 channel, if we look up at the top here, we can see this is the gate of growth and increase. That means that this is the gate of completion. This is bringing things to their highest fulfillment. We are growing and increasing to the highest height, to the end. And this is our purpose on the earth. This is the expansion of the resources which maximizes the development of full potential. You see, that's what this human experience is about. That's what this format is all about. That ability to say yes to an experience that can have a full beginning, middle, and end, that can go into the cycle and the spiral of one's contemplation, so that they can pull golden nuggets of wisdom out from it and then share it with the world. Share it with others in the collective. Now, what is the foundation? As mentioned before, it's diversification. We need to have a diverse foundation in order to eventually arrive at completion. Now, after we've had that diverse foundation, we need to be able to identify the various pieces and parts correctly within that diverse foundation. And this is something that we can get very caught up in a negative way. being able to identify with something or being able to identify something. If we misidentify something, if we look into the past and we learn a lesson that is sterile, then boom, we've learned a lesson that means nothing. We've learned a lesson that we will carry forward into making of more mistakes in the future. And how depressing that can be if you don't learn something that you can carry forward into a new experience in a good way. So my hope is that you can identify from the diversity the various constituent elements, that you can identify what's going on here and not get caught up in the various returning to the past and returning to the past and returning to the past that can happen so much in this abstract process, wherein they can lose sight of the present because they're still trying to dig into the past and identify something within that multifaceted diversity. Because the next step here is trial and error. Isn't that fun? This line 3 of the material world. In times of increase, mistakes are a natural part of the process. In times of increase, mistakes are a natural part of the process. You know, quote, mistake, unquote. And I put mistake in quotes because if you're able to learn from that mistake, then it's not even a mistake. It's a learning experience. Because, I mean, hey, we're growing, we're increasing towards the completion of our highest potential. That means we haven't done this before, you know? We're making sense of the past in this case. We actually need to be able to make these mistakes. We need to go through trial and error because this is the nature of the material world. If we don't make mistakes as we're increasing, then we don't learn anything. So things are simply handed to us, and that's not the experience that we're meant to have. Like it or not, it's simply the way it is. So now here in the 4th line, we have the middleman. Now this is about the 4th line. And remember something about the 4th line, that the 4th line exists in relationship to their network. Their network of people, their family, their friends, their business colleagues. This is not working with strangers necessarily. This is working with people that they know, their network. And so being able to be the middleman or the middlewoman between others within your network, the ability to bring these people together for the mutual benefit and the culmination of the whole. Because you know, you've already recognized that we have this foundation of diversity. We've identified the various pieces and parts of that diversity. We've gone through the trial and the error of trying to connect these parts and seeing what does or doesn't work on the way up. And now we are playing the role of the middleman, the opportunist. This 4th line looking out into the network, seeing all its friends, family, and colleagues and going, oh, hey, I think if you had a conversation, you might really have a good time. You might really enjoy that. And so there is this deep joy in the potential to be the middleman. And there's the deep depression that's possible for people who don't want to play that role if they have this gate. Especially in the full channel, this format energy of cyclical processes. If they're not interested or willing to connect people within their network to each other, if they're like, oh, you guys need to figure it out on your own, well, you know, then they're probably not actually having a good time. And so my wish for you is to recognize these parts within yourself. To not force yourself to have something you don't. Like, I don't have this middleman line. I don't have this 40-second gate. I don't like being the middleman. It's not part of my nature. I need to be able to concentrate and to focus into what I'm doing and translate this message as you see me right now. And that's good for me. It brings me out of depression and into the satisfaction I'm capable. Next up, one of my favorite lines, self-actualization. You see, we're no longer in the fourth line of looking into the network of friends and family and connecting these people together. We've already began this process. We've already done this connecting of people together. Now we're realizing the self. We are actualizing the self. We are going beyond this limited individual little self, in my opinion. For you see, self-actualization can be about the little self, and it can be about the big self with a capital S. So this little self is who you think you are. You know, it's the body you find yourself contained within. It's what you do for a living and what you tell other people your name is, what you like to do. All these little things, you know, this little person here on Earth, this tiny little speck of dust here in the vast galaxy and universe. That's the little self. And then what I like about this is the capital S, self-actualization. That ability to realize transcendental passenger awareness. That ability to recognize and realize and actualize transcendental passenger awareness. You see, there's this age-old question. Do we have free will? Do we have a choice? Personally, I believe we have one fundamental choice in this life. And that choice is to accept, honor, be with, and go to the highest height with one's individual difference, to accept the lines you were given at birth, and to live your life in a unique way. Or to listen to what the mind has to say. And the mind is busy transferring its intelligence away. It's busy amplifying open centers. It's busy looking for what's on the other side that can make it feel complete. You know, it's getting caught up in what might work for other people. And that's not self-actualization. That's not what we're here to do. So I don't even really consider it a choice. And yet there are many who participate with it, with the resistance and the frustration, the bitterness, the anger and the disappointment that comes with taking this thinking mind so seriously. Losing touch of your true self, whether that be your little self who likes ice cream and donuts, or this transcendental self that is aware that the eyes that I look from are part of this material world. And what actually looks through the eyes? Who is actually looking at this camera right now? It's not only me. It's not only this little person right here. There is infinite, transcendental, fractal awareness called the passenger. You know, the witness who's simply watching what happens. Behind the thinking about the thinking about the thinking, there is the passenger. And any of us can get in touch with that at any moment in life. And that is my belief. And that is why self-actualization is so important. That's why we need to be able to accept that there is diversity in life. And if we can identify the parts, if we can go through the trial and the error of connecting these parts, and eventually we can begin to connect people and these parts together in different ways, we can actualize ourselves and realize, I'm not only me. You know, I'm something bigger than myself. I am this whole universe looking through my eyes. And so are you, if you let it be. It's possible, you know? It can happen at any moment. And for a person with this line, it's deeply important. It's part of their nature. How do we go beyond that? Like, what could the sixth line possibly do to go beyond that? I mean, doesn't that sound like enlightenment itself? Well, let's see. We have line 6, which is simple. This is the line of nurturing. You know? What is the wisdom we learn after recognizing that we are this transcendental fractal passenger awareness, you know? Infinite consciousness, the whole universe experiencing life through an individual person. What do we do after we realize that? Well, we start nurturing the other people. We start nurturing the other parts of ourselves that are inside other people. We start nurturing the highest good, the ultimate culmination of life and the human experiential way. And we can only do that by reflecting upon the past, pulling out the golden nuggets, and then carrying them forward as a lesson learned and as something that we share. For you see, so far we've spoken about the three format energies. And now from Ra Uru Hu's classical human design teaching, these are the channels from which depression can originate. It's when these energies are fundamentally distorted away from their truth that the depression goes beyond even the individual, in my perception, and it goes into the collective, and it goes into the whole survival of the species or not, and the whole species could become depressed. You know, we have a world where people are starving, where other people are feasting. It's absolute madness out there. And we can solve it by sharing. We have this collective process. The 4253 and the 952. These are both collective processes. One is logical, sharing about the future. One is abstract, sharing about the past. Both bring about this attempt at wisdom, this attempt at improving the framework and perspective of mind in the life so that we can actually honor the form. We can honor the body. The 360 in between those two isn't interested in sharing necessarily. It's simply interested in, whoa, that's new. Like, that is the fire right there. I like that. Or nothing's happening. You know? Nothing's happening. It's just another day. The same old, same old. And so my perception of human design and the sacral center and depression for the generator goes beyond Ra's perspective. I don't hold myself to such rigid absolutist binaries as he did. I can clearly see and feel how each one of these channels that are available from the sacral could result in depression if the generator living in that body is not actually honoring the yes or the no that comes from within. Like as a 952, if I did not say yes to what brings concentration, if I was busy trying to, simply display my power for the sake of displaying my power, or if I was busy trying to bring awareness to the survival mechanism of life, if I was busy trying to only reflect upon the past, I'd be depressed. And I used to be heavily depressed. And then eventually I decided, I don't like this anymore. I don't like the taste it leaves in my mouth. It doesn't feel like it carries me forward in a good way. And from that moment onward, I began to, practice the opposite of depression. And at that stage in my life, it was about thinking. The old school strategic way of what am I thinking about? How can I manifest reality through my thoughts? I recognized that I could think and think and think down into a deep spiral of depression and upset forever. I called it the pit of eternal sadness. And eventually I got tired of it. I recognized that, if I can make myself feel more and more and more sad, if I can spiral down forever and ever, it seems like that way. Like I could just go deeper and deeper and deeper, become more and more sad. Why can't I do the opposite? It must also be true that I could spiral up and up and up and up and up and up to greater and greater heights. I could increase my vibration. I could expand my awareness into greater harmonic inclusiveness and gain access to bliss. I could gain access to love. I can learn how to nurture in this life and actually care for the differences that we have. And from that moment onward, my life has been devoted to understanding this to the fullest I possibly can, so that I don't have to experience depression. And not only that, so I can share it with you so that you don't have to be depressed anymore. Because it starts with our thinking. What are we thinking about? Are we thinking about our thinking about our thinking about our thinking about our thinking? Or are we paying attention to our body? Are we doing body scans and feeling, oh, I feel tension in my legs right now because I'm sitting cross-legged? You know, that changes everything, to be able to pay attention to the body and see where it wants to go, what it wants to do. It's got a lot more intelligence than my thinking mind, I'll tell you that much. People have said that only around 5% of the information that our brain and bodies process is actually conscious. That the vast majority of the information we're processing and dealing with is in the unconscious. And I mean, it makes sense. Every single cell in our body doing this, that, and the other thing. Every time we blink, every time we breathe, every time our heart beats, it's not like we're consciously aware and making sure, okay, heartbeat, 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 breath, 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 blink. Oh, you know, it's not like we have to pay attention to all that stuff. Oh, my liver, my spleen has got to do its job. And it does that on its own. This is the intelligence of genetics. And by trusting the type strategy and inner authority, that can actually rule the life, and we can experience something beyond the limited conception, perception powers of this thinking, rational mind. And that is what I wish to bestow upon each and every one of you, that blessing. And so our next channel that we're looking into is over here, connecting the spleen with the sacral center. This is the 2750. The basic job here for the 2750 is to bring awareness of survival into this sacral response process. So the 2750, I believe, is called a design of custodianship. This is something about cleaning up the process. You see, we bring awareness into life. We're able to clean up the details. We're able to sort things out in a nice way. And so what does this really look like when we're looking at response? And what can somebody say yes to with this 2750? This is the gate of caring and the gate of nourishment. This is the enhancement of the quality and the substance of all activities through caring. You know, if you really care about something, you're actually going to bring improvement to both the quality and the substance of any and every activity you do. You know, when you care, you're bringing awareness into this thing. And so what is the foundation of care, according to human design? Well, it's selfishness. Now, this is different from narcissism. This is not, I care so much about myself that I hurt you because I don't care about you. That's not what this is about at all. This is genuine selfishness. In human design, we call this enlightened selfishness. For you see, we've already gone over how self-actualization, we can see how my little self here that likes what I like and does what I do is basically a reflection of this greater self that is living through me. And so this selfishness is able to care for this body, for this vehicle that allows the greater self to live through. You know, this is the basis of care, that I care first for myself. And now that I have given myself care, I have the capacity to care for you as well. I can share some of this care. And so deep, deep, deep depression exists for those who do not have selfishness. If you do not care for yourself, then you cannot care for another being. And if you do not care for yourself, you cannot care for another being. How could you possibly be happy in this life? You could pretend that you're happy. You could try to fill your life with all kinds of things that don't mean anything. And it wouldn't go anywhere. So our foundation here is selfishness. This is the foundation of care. Because I put on my safety first. You know, if you're on an airplane and there's some situation and the masks fall down with oxygen, I put on my oxygen mask first, and then I'm able to care for those around me who may not be able to reach, like a child. And so this is the true essence of care and nourishment, is selfishness. I care for myself, therefore I can care for another. The second line is self-sufficiency. The obvious law that to give, one must have. You see, this is going further into what I was simply just saying. That first line is a little bit more interested in, well, my own security. I need to make sure I'm okay. And the second line is taking that into the next step, which is the self-sufficiency of I care for myself, and now I can care for you. The third line, this is where things get a little different. This is greed. This is what I would personally call a shadow self tendency. This is the obsession with having much more than one needs. This is no longer into the I care for myself so that I can also care for you. This shadow, this third line, this tendency to push things to the limit is interested in making sure it has more than enough for itself. You know, plenty excess. And that is a, quote, mistake, unquote. Because if all you have is stuff for yourself and you don't distribute it, then that stuff you have accumulated for yourself will not actually bring fulfillment, because others around you are not sharing in that fulfillment. And as human beings, we are naturally social creatures. No matter what the design is, we need each other. No one person is the whole of the totality within themselves. Sure, you might be able to access it, and yet you're only a piece of the puzzle of this grand picture that is life. And so the fourth line is generosity. Here we're seeing the solution to that greed. This is the natural sharing of attained abundance. For you see, this fourth line, unlike the third line, it's not simply caring about itself, bumping up into things and pushing everything to the limit. This fourth line is seeing others. It is looking at others. It is interested on what is in the other side. Who else is out there? Where is my network? Oh, hey, I've got a network of people, and all these people, they're doing different things. I've identified the diversity within them, and we're building it up towards nourishment. And how do I nourish them? Well, I'm generous. You know, I have enough for myself, and I'm able to share the abundance around. And so if you're a fourth line in this gate of caring, this 27.4, and you're not generous, you're probably unhappy, because you were born to be able to share that attained abundance. I believe the only real reason that somebody with this line would not be generous is basically because the mind has taken over. Of course, there's the nature of generous or not. And my belief is that lacking this true self quality, lacking this nature of sharing attained abundance, will bring depression. Like I said before, we're social creatures after all. And this fourth line knows all about being able to share energy and information throughout their network, and then witnessing pieces and parts coming back to them that they couldn't have done on their own, because it's a network of people, of colleagues, of friends. And so what comes after this generosity? How do we care deeper? Well, the executor is able to effectively distribute the resources of others. And so here we've actually obtained something beyond one's individual relationship with all these other people within their network. We've reached the stage of universal practicality. We've reached the stage where they're not even my resources. I simply know that this person over here has this, and another person over there has different things that can work together to create a bigger, better picture for us all. So that's the ability to effectively distribute the resources of others. Going beyond that, line 6 is wariness. This is a protection against an abuse of generosity. You see, an abuse of generosity, being wary that I'm not going to overshare, I'm not going to give you way too much. I got to make sure that you're going to trust, you're going to operate in a good way with what I have shared. This sixth line takes a step back. It's always taking a step back in its nature, especially once it achieves that on the roof stage of life, that ability to see things a little bit more objectively and not only subjective and personal. It takes that step back, it becomes a bit more objective, it develops an individual truth that it then can role model going forward in life. And so the role model here is the ability to be and have protection against an abuse of generosity. We're not here to enable drug addicts to hurt themselves. You might think you're being nice by giving them food, or rather, hopefully if you give them food, that's simply a good thing. However, if you have a drug-addicted person and you're simply giving them money, you're being generous, you think, and then they're abusing it by hurting themselves. That's what this sixth line can protect against and be a role model for, that we no longer do this kind of behavior. And that's why this is called a design of custodianship. Because not only do I care about myself, I have this foundation of selfishness. I have learned how to care for others. I have learned how to share what I have gained and learned with another. And I have learned how to not simply give for the sake of giving. I have learned how to know when to give, where to give, how to give. In yoga, we call this aparigraha. This is knowing when to give gifts and knowing when to receive gifts, knowing when to say no, knowing when to decline something that would be free. Oh, this is totally free. It's simply generous. No, it's a hidden abuse. And so this is a role model for that potential of protection against the abuse of generosity. So there's all kinds of different things this person is saying yes for in the 27. The ideal yes, Yes, I can care for myself. Yes, I can share resources with you. Yes, I can be greedy and accumulate too much for myself. Yes, I can actually distribute your resources to others in need. Yes, I can share the overabundance of what I have within myself. And no, I'm not going to share when it's dangerous, when it brings about that potential for abuse. And yes, hey, wonderful. This is a great place to share. And I'm going to share all this that I'm talking about right now. And so next up, we have the most powerful gate in the entire body graph, essentially, when it comes to individuality. We have the 34th gate in this sacral center, pointing towards the spleen, pointing towards the G center, the center of self, and pointing towards the throat. So this single gate here, this 34, has the capacity to power the spleen, the G, and the throat. This has to be a very powerful gate, and in fact, it's called the gate of power. And power is only great when its display or its use serves the common good. This is what we've learned about power. This is how the individual can actually integrate their power in a healthy way, is honoring the fact that if you have power and you throw it willy-nilly, you might not end up satisfied because you're not satisfying the other. And now we're about to get into a paradox, because what is the foundation of this? The bully. Line 1 for the power of the great is the indiscriminate use of power. Once again, this is another example of why the Rave I Ching, as brought about by Ra-Uru Hu, who manifested all of human design, is a not-self I Ching. This is basically describing the shadows of the world he saw all around him. People steeped in thinking, never thinking about their body, not paying attention to their body, simply being strategic in their thinking for their own survival and the benefit of their team at the expense of anything else. And so the not self foundation for the power of the great is the bully. This is using power indiscriminately. This is not paying attention to the greater good. Meaning that the true self foundation for this line is not the bully. This is the one who uses their power and demonstrates their power for the benefit of themselves and others, not only themselves. And in line 2, we have momentum. So we see that whether we're dealing with a bully or whether we're dealing with, say, an investigator who actually cares about others, we're gaining momentum in this second line. You see, we have this natural power that's going to build and build and build and build one way or the other. This is the nature of the natural, of the line 2. And so this natural power of the individual to build up momentum more and more and more. And where does that momentum go? But into the third line of machismo. This is the indiscriminate display of power. You see? Once again, we're seeing this indiscriminate, which is a keynote for me that we're seeing the not self. We're seeing the shadows of what's going on here. This is somebody without discernment, somebody without awareness, somebody without wisdom who is simply putting their power on display so that they can feel strong and tough and powerful. And what does that really do? Well, it doesn't do anything for anybody. It doesn't help anybody, that's for sure. And so what does this mean in the truth? My perspective is that this is the display of power precisely where, when, and how it benefits the greater good. This is the display of power for the protection of the weak, for example. Like, hey, you want to be a bully to that person over there? Well, check out what I'll do to you if you're mean to them. Like, don't you mess with them. That's not okay. We're kind to people around here. And in my perspective, that's true machismo. That's true masculine strength and qualities, is that ability to defend the weak. And I don't mean weak to say lesser. I simply mean physical strength in this material world. For the third line is all about the material, physical, atomic birds, bees, tables, and trees world. And what comes after this third line? We have the fourth line of triumph. This is the freedom in absolute victory to unlimited use of power. Now, isn't that incredible? We leave the machismo, we move into the fourth line, entering this transpersonal field where we're more interested in the other than we are with ourselves. And this fourth line becomes the freedom in absolute victory to the unlimited use of power. I mean, isn't that incredible? You're not limited in your power. You're absorbed in other people and what they're thinking and doing within your network. And because of that, your power goes into these other people. They amplify it and give it back to you. Now, this is much like momentum before it in line 2, in that it can be really beautiful or really depressing, really painful, really sad. Are you giving people power? Are you giving power to be amplified for evil? Or are you giving power to be amplified for the greater good? Are you showing people how to be true to themselves by demonstrating it? Or are you continuing the cycle of karmic abuse and genetic trauma that our ancestors used to dominate the material world? I know what my hope is. Next up, we have the fifth line, which is annihilation. This is the total elimination of resistance. Now, this is a key word right here, resistance. What does resistance mean? Does it mean you've defeated your enemies in the world, that you've killed people? Or does it mean that you've eliminated the resistance within yourself? You found the value in eliminating your desire to be what you are not. You found the strength and the power and the responsibility that you carry within yourself to be practical in life, as a good fifth line is, to be able to deliver to the stranger what they need to hear. Next up, we have line 6. This is common sense. How we get beyond annihilation is with common sense. Knowing when enough is enough. This is a key phrase for the entire sacral center itself. If you are somebody who does not have a defined sacral center, then this knowing when enough is the general keynote for what your mind is going to try to trick you with. That you don't know when enough is enough, and you want more and more and more and more and more and more, or you need to do more and more and more and more and more. It's never enough. You got to keep pushing through until it's gone way too far. And avoiding the depression of going too far with things is this common sense of knowing when enough is enough. This 6th line, taking all this incredible unlimited power, this annihilation of resistance, and instead of using it to cause harm, it's for the greater good. It becomes common sense. Which is kind of ironic in my opinion, because we're dealing with the 6th line after all. We're dealing with a unique differentiating role model for what common sense is. So it's not simply, oh, everybody knows it. No, it's this person has a common sense. This person has a sense about life that can be common for those who follow behind them in the wake of their influence. Because, oh yeah, we've learned from this person already. They're role modeling the truth for us as they're blazing a trail into the unknown, that there are things to do and there are things to not do with the incredible power and responsibility each and every one of us contains on the inside. And so to each and every one of you who have this line in the gate of power for common sense, I give you my best wishes and I give you my deepest thanks around bringing common sense into this world, to know when enough is enough, to not push things beyond the limit of what serves the greater good, so that we don't have to be so depressed about life and what's going on here. So this person can say yes to power, like either they're demonstrating their power, they're using their power for evil, or they're using their power for good. You know, my hope is for the greater good, because that's what makes the power great and not simply powerful. Because when we are in service to others, this means we've already learned how to serve ourselves and care for ourselves. And we recognize that when we serve another, we are serving ourselves. And so when we demonstrate our power for the greater good, we're serving that big S self, as if we are self-actualized and we know who we are on this plane, and we're not confined by what other people think of us. And isn't that beautiful? Our next channel here is the 15-5, connecting the sacral with the G center. So this 15-5 is a very special channel. This 15-5 is the rhythm of life itself. Every single individual, single-celled piece within you, every single cell within you is a single cell because it has this 15-5 as a channel within itself. And so what is the 15-5? Well, the 5 is the pause, the 5 is the wait, and the 15 is the extreme on the other end. This is what makes music, and this is what makes life, is this logical pattern. To be able to pause, and then to go into the extreme, to go all the way to the other side. And then to pause, and to go boom, over to the other side. Being able to work with this logical pattern that can find a balance in the extreme. Because there is a natural pause. This is what gives the generator the capacity to wait. And now waiting is such a beautiful thing. Waiting is not simply sitting down, doing nothing, staring at a wall, waiting for your life to happen. Waiting is breathing, basically. Let me show you why. The gate of fixed rhythm, the gate of waiting, the fundamental attunement to natural rhythms. Waiting as an active state of awareness. And what can you be actively aware of in every moment in your life? You can be aware of your breath, for it will never truly stop until your body on this plane is done and you have moved on to somewhere else. This active state of awareness and this deep potential for yoga is here in this fifth gate, to be able to wait, to be able to breathe, and to be active and alert, paying attention in the moment. Truly. And now, what is the foundation of this waiting? What makes this so special? From the very beginning, this foundation is perseverance. This is perseverance. This is, if the captain must, he goes down with the ship. This is going all the way to the very end, whether it's bitter or beautiful, whether it's frustrating or it's satisfying. This is going all the way to the end. And this is something that's very important. This is about the captain, and if he must, he will go down with the ship. This isn't any ship. This isn't simply, oh, I'm going to sacrifice myself because I think I can save this ship full of people that doesn't belong to me. No, if a ship is going down, a ship is going down. Are you the captain of that ship or not? As the captain of his own ship, he bears the responsibility and the honor, the dignity and the grace to be with his ship to the very end. This does not mean sacrificing oneself in the attempt to save something that cannot be saved. We've already learned that some mutations are not stable. They're not fertile. They're infertile. They can't go on. They can't reproduce. They can't create new life and keep going on and on and on. And so this is a deep acceptance that first I must be selfish. First I must care for myself and my own ship. Otherwise I can't possibly know how to care for another. And that is why the captain may go down with their own ship, is because it's their essence, it's their root, it's what gives them a grounding into this place, and it's what makes them a captain, is that it's their ship. You know, they are the leader of this force. And in the metaphor of human design, there is the vehicle, the passenger, and the driver. I've already spoke a little bit about the passenger. This is the highest state, passenger awareness. You know, life is a movie. And what is this movie? Well, this is a movie of a vehicle or a ship that is being driven by someone. This someone called the magnetic monopole, which we'll get to in a moment in the next channel. And then there's the passenger who's watching it all play out. You see, the driver knows where they're going. There's no way for the passenger to interrupt the driver of life. And so in the honor and the balance of the grace, the captain will do everything he possibly can to maintain the order and the correctness of the ship so that it will not sink. This is like the driver. This is like the monopole that we'll talk about soon. And so that's the foundation. And what are we paying attention to? The breath. The breath being so deeply important to the vehicle, this ship, this human body that we find ourselves living within. For we can only go with water for so long, we can only go without food for so long, we can only go without human contact and touch for so long, and yet the breath is the first to go. If you're not breathing, death will soon follow, and the ship will go down. And so what comes after perseverance? Well, we find the line 2 of inner peace. This is the ability to ignore the temptation to make premature actions. You see, there's all this pressure, like we're sitting here, we're waiting, or we're simply breathing. Whether we're breathing deep or shallow, are we paying attention? If we're breathing shallow, we may not be paying attention. We may be allowing the automatic processes to, getting stressed out, recognizing that I need to do something, I need to do something, I need to do something, and getting out of whack, getting out of alignment. This is not inner peace. Inner peace is what builds upon the captain. Now we have this capacity to avoid premature action. We know that we can breathe through it. We can allow the waiting and the pause to be a joyful pause, knowing that another extreme will follow. Life goes up and down, up and down. And it's not like it stops until it's all over. And even then, some would say it's a brand new beginning. And so once we've been able to ignore and avoid the temptation for premature action, we've learned how to not do that. Our next step is in the third line of compulsiveness, the fear engendered by the sense of helplessness resulting in unnecessary stress and activity. Isn't that funny? You see that second line bringing their natural wisdom into play of, I know how to ignore that. That's simply a premature action motivation. And I know my way. I'm a natural at what I do. I'm a second line. Whereas the third line, this is compulsiveness. The third line is interested in pushing things to the limit, finding the boundaries, finding the barriers, bumping into things. And so it could feel helpless about this. Like, everything I do doesn't work. I really need to do something. I really need to behave. This unnecessary stress and activity creates compulsiveness. All because this material world, it pushes us, it compels us to act and do something. All these people around you saying, hey, get your stuff together, get your life together, do your job, do your work, get it up, pull yourself by the bootstraps and get back to work, get out there. And a lot of it is unnecessary stress. A lot of it is unnecessary activity. And so for the truly attuned third line, there's the capacity to get out of that depressive potential of being stressed out and wasting all your energy on things that are not necessary. There's that capacity to recognize, hold on, I've tried a lot of these different things, and I know that a lot of it is a waste of time. So I'm going to take a note from that second line and take a deep breath and wait. Because the fourth line, no longer so self-absorbed like the 1, 2, and 3, now it's absorbed in the other, interested in what the other has going on. This becomes the hunter. This is waiting as a guarantee of survival. Now, isn't that interesting? Instead of the compulsive nature of the 3, this feeling of helplessness and even depression around unnecessary stress and activity, this is, I need to wait, and I know how to wait, because it means I will be guaranteed survival. I am the hunter. I can breathe slow and wait for my prey. You see, the fourth line is called the opportunist. They're always interested in looking at the other and what the other is occupied with, and how to connect these others, and how to share with the others, how to be a benefactor. And they're called the opportunist in this sense because they're like a hunter lying in wait. In this moment, there will sooner or later be a time to strike, you know? And it guarantees survival, that ability to simply breathe and not act on compulsive behaviors, to ignore unnecessary stress and not be helpless. Because you breathe and you pay attention in your body to what life has for you. Beyond that, we have the fifth line, the line of joy, waiting as an aspect of enlightenment. Not only does paying attention to our breath in this sense guarantee survival, it is also an aspect of enlightenment. Now, what is enlightenment? What is filling up with light like? You know, when you're no longer afraid of the unknown, because you are a beacon of the known, of the good. You have your power that has already gone beyond unlimited access, beyond this nature of being a petty bully. You have this capacity to breathe in the prana of life and to feel that, to be with the energy of life, to pay attention in your body and notice that every breath is a blessing from the whole universe. It is this relationship with spirit and with the life all around us. You know, it's said that someone actually won the Nobel Prize for proof that physical local reality is not true. Huh? You know, local reality is not the true reality. This physical stuff we see, it's made up of vibrations, you know? It's made up of energy that is moving in certain frequencies that makes up patterns that then build atop each other, and they're called electromagnetics. It's only this tiny little band of frequency that makes up the entire visible world. A very tiny little band in this wide expanse of energy interacting with itself. And so if we can breathe in the light, we can breathe in the joy of life and discover that things are not the way we have thought they are. In the absolute binary of the Ajna center, you know, the two-petaled lotus of ancient yoga, this left and right, this and that, myself and the other, good and bad. Essentially, all of that stuff up in the mind is a perception from limited awareness. You know, it's this black and white relative expansion. And you know, it's wonderful. It allowed us to get to where we are today. And the thing is, it is no longer the dominant awareness center. The light of love and the light of joy and the light of life has begun to move into the solar plexus. And while the solar plexus still operates as a motor, pushing us around, you know, emotions that could often be ignorant, dominating the world, which is why Stoicism became so valuable. Back then in the old world, there was no chance for emotions to become aware. The solar plexus was simply a motor pushing us around for the feel good, you know? And now our enlightenment can include genuine emotional awareness. It is possible. And if you breathe in this moment, you might just feel a little bit of that and recognize this thing called joy. Now, what the heck can go beyond that? Line 6 is yielding. Waiting is never free from pressure, physical or mental, and is often punctuated by the unexpected. You see, that's what the enlightened master knows, is that life is full of pressures, and they're no longer the determining force for everything in their life in their mind. The mind has found a place of stillness. It has found a place of a rhythm. Because what is stillness but the punctuation between one extreme and another? the unexpected extremes of this sixth line give it that capacity to yield, to back up, to, whoa, hold on, that was something else right there. Let me breathe it in. Let me feel around with that. Let me be with this. Because there's something unexpected coming through. And if I breathe deep, I can find my survival, I can find my joy, I can know when to yield, and I can know when to ascend and move forward. And so what is this 15-5 about? What is this 5 here to say yes to? Well, it's here to wait for its yes. You see, it has its own rhythm. It has its own extremes in the very cellular structure of its body. Every single cell in the body of a person with the 15-5, given a differentiation imprint called a channel, every single cell has its own unique little extreme flair about it. And, you know, it's very magnetic. It pulls other people into its nature. Sometimes people with this channel have been called fairy-like, because it's as if they float around in their own energy, and other people become enamored by it, pulled into the rhythm of their flow, because they're able to move from one extreme to the next, and the next, and the next. And they have these pauses in between. And that pause is the magic of the sacral. Another deep breath before behavior. And so next we have the 14-2, or the 214. This channel here, connecting the G center to the sacral, is very powerful and very profound. Now, it's a different kind of power from the raw energy of the 34. They're both individual. However, the 34's individuality is for the integration of that individual to live their life. You know, their specific personal individual life. The 214 is a different kind of power. It's called power skills. It's about filling up the wagon with resources so that we can transport these resources to the other side. And not only that, we can transmute the energy up into a higher order of things. You see, there's something called the penta. And the penta is what's called a transauric form. So it's actually born out of multiple of us, multiple people, being together in aura, being in proximity. You know, you got 5 people in a room together, there's a penta there, and that penta is pulling information and details from each person. It doesn't care about the whole of who you are. It truly doesn't. And it does care that you survive. It wants nothing more than to continue its life as a birthing from each of you involved in the penta. And this 214 is what pulls the energy from the side channels inward and up into the higher order, you see. So this is about the stability, the sustainment of the group. This is the origin of the group think in the penta. You know, we get people together and they start losing their individuality for the benefit of continuity. You know, you lose a little bit of yourself when you're part of the crowd because the crowd wants to keep going, you know? Like, we don't want to die, we want to keep going. So do your part, you know, do your work. And this 214 is about making sure that penta survives. It's transmuting the energy inward and upward. So what is the foundation of this from the sacral center? This 14th gate. This is the accumulation and retention of power through skilled interaction, coupling grace with control. The gate of possession in great measure. Now here we have grace and control, which allows for skilled interaction to accumulate and retain power. You see this penta here? It's not so much about the individual, even though it is. It's about a little bit more of a transcendental individual. That I know that I feed myself and I've got resources of food. I can share my food with you and we can continue going on. We have grace and control. We can transmute our energy inward and upward. And so once again, what is the foundation of this? This is line 1. Money is not everything. The recognition that wealth has its own problems. You know, this is what the world has yet to learn. And it's amazing that this line is written in a true self fashion, that money is not everything, because we see it all around us, that we've been abused by money, that money is making demands from us. The world demands more and more of it from us. And yet money is not everything. Money is the lowest common denominator of exchange and of power skills. Money, I mean, it goes everywhere, you know? It's not hard to find. It's not hard to get rid of. Wealth has its own problems. You know, there's so many people who've thought, oh, all I need is more money and my problems will go away. I know I've thought it myself. And yet the reality is that is not the case. Wealth brings its own problems. We'll never get away from having problems in this life. What do we do about them? Now that will define the character and the nature of who and what we are. Going beyond that, we have management. The wisdom that investing in expertise brings rewards. So already we've seen that money is not everything, and we know that we can manage energy and invest in expertise, you know? This is recognizing, oh, that's a skillful use. I'd like to be able to be in touch with that, whether it is improving my skills or whether it's having access to a person who I can manage with a skill. The ability to have expertise and recognizing the rewards of that. This is the natural wisdom of the second line in the 14th gate. The third line here is service. The utilization of talent and wealth for the highest good. Here we are seeing more of the deep, deep truth. This third line that falls down 5 times and get up 6, falls down 7 times and get up 8. You know, it recognizes, hey, I mean, we're all going through trials and tribulations here. This is the material world, after all, where things don't always go as expected. Here we can utilize our talent and wealth for the highest good, much like that 34th gate, wherein power is only great when it's used for the highest good. Here we have the line of service, that I can bump into all these things and, oh, hey, I bumped into that. Well, you know what? If I give some energy over there, if I demonstrate some skills, maybe I won't have that problem. Maybe I won't bump into this thing so harshly. I can make it softer, or I can make that bump a pleasurable bump. Beyond that, we have the 4th line of security. This is the concentration on establishing a strong foundation. And so if you know anything about human design already, you might think that's kind of funny, because the concentration on establishing a strong foundation, the 4th line generally doesn't care about that. The 4th line is a transpersonal line. It's not a personal line. It's not line 1. Line 1 is about building the foundations and establishing security. And yet here we find it in the 4th line. You see this pentastructure. This 214 is changing things. It's different now. There's not only the little self. There is the big self at play. And so this 4th line, this interest in looking at the others, all these different others become another part of the self within that pentic aura. And the only way to have a foundation is by sharing the resources, is by sharing the energy, by coupling grace with control. Beyond this, we have the 5th line of arrogance, which is the ever-present risk of abuse in positions of power. We've seen this so many times in so many ways, in so many places, in real life, in movies, and books, and shows, everywhere. They say absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's where this line comes from, in a sense. That if somebody is in a position of power, they've got a lot of resources, they've got universal energy in that sense, there's the temptation to not be so practical with it, or to be practical for one's own benefit at the expense of another. That potential to be arrogant. Beyond this, we find line 6, humility. This is wealth and power at its most exalted. For you see, in that 5th line of arrogance, there's this nature of, well, it's all temporary, it's all transitory, these are my people, those are your people, I'd really rather feed my people. You guys can deal with it, we'll be fine. The 6th line takes a different approach. The 6th line is not here purely for its own hexagram process. The 6th line is ready to move into becoming the first line of the next gate in a clockwise motion around the wheel of Dharma. And so here we find humility, wealth and power at its most exalted. The 6th line has that ability to take a step back, to be objective about all this wealth and all this power, and to demonstrate as a role model that humility is possible, that honesty is possible, integrity is possible. Enlightened selfishness is a possible thing. That I care about myself first because I know that only then can I care about you in a good way, for real. And it's the 6th line who can really step into this in such a way that we can see from miles away. You see, the 6th line, they don't have to really make a big fuss about it. The 6th line is a big fuss. They don't need to make it up about it. For the longest time in our history, we've been dealing with 6th lines who were deep hypocrites. As I said earlier, do as I say and not as I do. That was the 7-centered highest truth. It was hypocrisy. And it's no longer the way for us. We are 9-centered human beings. We have the capacity for receptivity to something greater. I always thought it was deeply ironic that the old 7-centered human being, anatomically modern human that made all the yogas, they made all the stories, they did everything we could imagine. Their highest yoga, their highest strategy was to become receptive. And yet each and every one of us today has been born with a capacity for receptivity. We don't have to work for it. It's what you are. You've been given it as a birthright. If only you let it be what it is. And in doing so, you can find humility. Like, yes, I am rich. Yes, I am wealthy. Yes, I have all the power in the world. It's not a big deal. It doesn't matter. It's simply a distraction. What is important? What is important? It's that I care for myself. Because if I can care for myself, then I can care for you. And I can nourish your development so that one day you may see what does matter and distinguish that from what doesn't matter. And we're not so locked up in this strategic ignorance program of genetic pain and trauma. Our parents didn't know how to raise us, and their parents didn't know how to raise them, and their parents didn't know how to raise them, on and on and on and on to the beginning of it all. And yet it doesn't have to be this way. Each and every one of us has the capacity for receptivity that goes beyond the ordinary, rational, logical mind. And it's nothing special. It's simply uniqueness. Each and every one of us has the potential to polish the mirror that is our consciousness into reflecting something greater than has ever been imagined before. And that is another blessing I wish to bestow upon you. For it is possible, each and every one of us, to reflect the unknown in a brand new way, to bring in this mutation that we were born to share with humility. And so what does this person say yes to? Well, they say yes to accumulation. They say yes to building it up. They might say yes to arrogance. And really, they're here to say yes to humility. That I have the power, I have the wealth, I have the strength, and it's no big deal. You know, it's okay. We have the resources. This world is abundant. Simply by being myself, I am taken care of. And so if this person does not have the chance to build up in that way, they are most likely being given no's. They're telling no's to others. That, I don't see the ability to rise up in this thing, and so I don't really care. You know, it's not for me. I don't feel like it's a power skill here. It doesn't mean anything. And that's healthy. It's the biggest thing, is saying no can be one of the most important things in your entire life. Knowing what to decline, what to say no to. Next up, we have the 2946, which is very funny because this 29th gate is all about saying yes. It's called the abysmal, the deep within the deep within the deep within the deep. Now, why is yes abysmal? Well, you ever heard of the yes man? It's like, yep, I can do that for you. 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 Would you like to do this to me? Oh, sure. Yeah. Oh, you want to steal my money? Sure. You want to hurt me? Yeah, let's do it. I'm ready. That 29 is ready to make a commitment at any moment's notice. However, what commitment will truly fulfill the 2946? What will truly bring the satisfaction this person is here to experience? Well, I'll let you in on a little something about me personally. And that's this 4629 is my favorite channel in the entire body graph. I love this channel so much. This channel is success where others fail. And not only that, it is failure where others succeed. And this is what I love so much about it. This is that double-edged sword of, are you living your life or not? If you're trying to live the life that belongs to someone else, you will fail miserably. You will not push upward towards heaven in the name of that 46th gate. You will crash back down onto the earth because that's somebody else's life. And you might feel really depressed about it because you were so ready to make a commitment. You know, you're so ready to say yes. I've said yes to so many things and nothing has ever worked. All because this thinking mind was too busy amplifying things that don't belong to it. And yet in reality, this person is ready to say yes to succeed where others will fail. And how profound is that? Others cannot accomplish what you are here to do. I'll say that again. Others cannot accomplish what you are here to do. And that's why this world suffers so much. It's because we're all, well, not all of us, and yet so many of us are doing our darndest to fit as a gear, moving in a machine of society that's trying to grind us down into mere batteries to charge the power supplies of the rich and wealthy. And it's so upsetting, and it's only temporary. You know, it's part of this life, and the ages are shifting. This energy of success where others fail is going to be so important, because there are people doing things that others could not do, and that will allow others to do what they are here to do. And we can grow out of this money is everything, feed the machine, feed the beast system of the old world. You know, I mentioned about the seven-centered human and how they're purely strategic. Well, they died out during the cross of planning, which is this cross, this global age we find ourselves in, beginning in the year 1615, I do believe. We entered this cross of planning, which brought about industries and bargains and agreements and societies that are, I'll do this for you if you do that for me, and eventually that became backhand closed-door deals that none of us are really privy to, and yet they're making decisions about our lives and tons of money for their own benefit of the rich and the wealthy that are just accumulating more and more and more and more and more and more. You know, this greed and this arrogance we'd heard about earlier. And so we basically, as nine-centered humans with this capacity for greater receptivity, were born into a world that was built by the previous human species. And so we are not here to succeed in their world. We are here to recognize that money is not everything. You know, I can support you, you can support me in ways beyond money. You know, we've all got different skills and different talents. We can learn to be decentralized and share amongst each other without needing their resources. And so what is the foundation of this gate? What is the foundation of this channel from the sacral, this 29th gate? We have saying yes, the abysmal. This is persistence despite difficulties has its inevitable rewards. That is what we want to see here, is that eventually we find the rewards. We persevere through the toughness. We were born into this world that was not made for us, and we persevere, and there's a new age upon us. 2027, only a few years away, a whole new era begins. And so part of this foundation is the draftee. How do we get to the new world? Well, for one, we adapt to struggle when it's necessary. And we know it's not a permanent state. You see, we accept that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. This is the truth of perseverance and this draftee. This notion of saying yes is that I'm ready to say yes and adapt to the challenges along the way because I know it's not going to be a struggle forever. I know that I persevere, I keep pushing through, I keep giving life what I have to give it. In response as a generator, and life is paying attention because I'm paying attention. And I will find the inevitable rewards for my perseverance because I am truly selfish. I care about my life. And because I care about my life, I can care about yours very deeply. What goes beyond this is line 2. This is assessment. You see, this is persistence tempered by caution. I don't simply care about your life because you're alive. I care about your life because I know that you have the chance to grow beyond all the previous humans. You have the chance as a living, breathing human of today to share your gifts with the world. And if you share your gifts with the world, then you alleviate some of the suffering. You give this world what it's asking for, what it's paying attention to see. This brand new thing, this success where others fail. Because you have caution. You're persistent, and you're also paying attention. You're not simply trudging through the mud all day long forever, not expecting anything to get better. You know, that sounds like the theme of today, this depression, this not using energy correctly. You have to have this caution. You have to be paying attention in your perseverance to know it'll lead somewhere. We have line 3 of evaluation. In this context, properly assessed inaction. And so not only do we persevere through the mud because we know there's a reward at the end, we also can take a moment and assess the situation. Go, hold on a second. You know, I've been trudging through this stuff for a long time. What's happened? What's it given me? If it's given me nothing, then I take that moment in action. I recognize, hold on, I've evaluated this situation and something isn't working. So I'm going to change it. I'm going to do 90 degrees and go this way now. I'm going to do something different. Ideally, I'm going to stop listening to this thinking mind. I'm going to start listening to my gut. I'm going to start listening to my body's innate intelligence, the 95% of information processing that's going on within myself. I'm not going to let that 5%, that tiny little thing that I'm aware of, tell life what to do. I mean, that's ignorance to the highest extreme as far as I can tell. That's not cautious. That's trudging through the mud forever and getting nowhere. Maybe it worked for the previous human, and it doesn't work for us. Next up, we have line 4, directness. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Very simple, very clear, and yet we can lose sight of it. We're networking, we're in the 4th line theme here, so we're talking about seeing all these other people and noticing what they're doing and what's going on, and we can see all these people kind of fumbling about. You see, that's the thing about the not self and this thinking mind, is that it will mess your life up, and it'll go, oh dang, that's not my fault, because of blah, 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 blah. It's always got an excuse. It's always got a justification for everything. The seven-centered being made sure we had justifications for every single hypocritical behavior you could ever imagine. They were really good at it. And we don't have to live by that anymore. We can be direct with each other and communicate in a straight line on a level playing field. We can be honest. The 5th line is overreaching, the tendency to bite off more than one can chew. One might see a little bit about why that 5th line could be arrogant, because it tends to overreach. This 5th line, it needs to be practical, otherwise it turns into a heretic, and it has this tendency to ask for more or to reach for more than it can actually handle. And that's why it needs to be practical, so that it can actually deliver, so that it can actually digest what it has bitten off. Each one of us has a role to play in this life. No single one of us is here to save the world. As far as I can tell, that's not really the purpose here. This world is supposed to be a training ground. It's supposed to be difficult, so that we can make strong souls and difficult, capable people of handling the difficulty. Not simply soft, weak, everything is nice and fluffy, and the clouds and rainbows and sunshine and butterflies, and that's a fantasy. This is the real world. We need to be able to honor the fact that we can overreach our bounds and overstep our bounds, and then hold on. This is the real world. I made a mistake, I've learned from my mistake. Now I know better. And I will go forward in a good way. What do we find after this overreaching 5th line? Is we find the 6th line of confusion. You see, it doesn't always get easier. This is the state that exists when momentum outstrips awareness. The state which exists when momentum outstrips awareness. And this can go either way. Like everything else, this can go for the greater good, and it could go for, something unimportant, something that doesn't matter. It could go for avoiding the truth, or it could go for holding on to what's bad, or it could go for looking for love and direction outside of itself, or being busy simply for busy's sake to try and get rid of the pressure. Or it could be for the greater good. And this is the difference between the role model and the hypocrite. Is that the hypocrite is caught up in mental amplification. It's caught up in transference. It's caught up in, I can think about this transferred state, and therefore I can keep building on this thinking, and I can really figure all this stuff out because, You know, this is science, you know, we only work with what we know, and this is what we know. This is what we work with. This is what we build from. And that kind of certainty is dangerous. Very, very dangerous. Because right here we're seeing that the sixth line can be confused. And what is it confused about? The fact that the momentum behind its life force, you see, that 95% is going so much faster than the 5%. There's so much more of it, and it's got momentum that's built up. You know, life, we are flying through space on a rock so very fast. And if you think you can simply jump off and do something different, on one hand, I wish you the best. On the other hand, I encourage you to not. I encourage you to not build resistance and try to be different from your amplification system. I encourage you to trust your body, to trust the 95%, to trust your unconscious, your type strategy and inner authority. Because then when you are trusting life, your momentum can outstrip your awareness, and you've found yourself confused because you're going too fast to keep up consciously. And it's not a problem. It's not a problem at all, you know? It's a-okay. Because the thing is, we are here to be the extreme, embedded within the extreme, completely at rest. It's one of my favorite quotes from Ra'uruhu. We are here to be the extreme, embedded within the extreme, at rest. You know, there is this, there is that, we're flying through space, and I'm watching the movie, you know? It's a-okay, it's a great time. Look at what happens. I have no idea what's coming next, because my momentum outstrips my awareness. You know, I can't keep up with this. I can reflect on the past, and I can build a projection for the future. I can watch the mutation come through. Doesn't mean I know what it is. It means I can watch it, and I can be with it. And when I am trusting my body, my inner authority and type strategy, then I am working for the greater good, because I'm selfish enough to care about myself and my life. And that allows me to care about you. So that's my favorite channel in the whole body graph. Success where others fail, and failure where others succeed. So if you've got this channel, this 2946 in your design, know that you are meant for great things. You are meant to help this world, and not simply save the world. You're here to help people recognize that their individual world can be saved. And you can do that simply by demonstration, by being yourself and succeeding where others have failed. Because if you do not go the route others have failed, if you operate from fear and survival, then you will fail where others have succeeded, because you're not meant to do what's already been done. You're simply not. And so trust the process. And I wish you the best. We have only one channel left here in this sacral system, bringing a whole new order of awareness potential for the sacral is this 59-6, or the 659, connecting the solar plexus to the sacral. This is a design of mating. This is quite literally the process of bringing new life into the world. You see, that 360 was about mutations and new forms and new ways of being. Can it truly be fertile? Or is it infertile? And do we need to detach and break the bond from it? Well, this 659 is a bit different. This is not simply about bringing a mutation into the world. This is about continuing the life process, knowing that this life is temporary and we need to mate with each other. You know, we need to make more. We need to go forth and multiply, after all. Now, this is a very powerful channel. This sixth gate over here, this sixth gate in the solar plexus, is said to be the mother of all emotional waves. You see, this tribal wave of the ratchet of click, 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 boom! This individual wave of the plane, you know, boing, whoa, or oh my god. It's either wonderful or it's horrible or it's nothing's happening, you know. I'm simply planing. And lastly, this desirous wave of the collective abstract process, this building and building and building of the fantasies, and oh my gosh, it's so great and amazing, and then I crash all the way down to the very bottom and maybe even lower than I was before building back up the desire for the next experience. Oh wow, how is that one gonna? And this sixth gate is the mother of them all. You see, it's kind of got them all built into it. So it can be a bit confusing, you know? The momentum can outstrip the awareness, especially with 6-line activations going on. And so what is the foundation of this 59 in the sacral center? This is the gate of sexuality and dispersion, the ability to break down barriers to achieve union. This is what we need to be able to do. This is the only way we can make more. We have to break down the barriers and the walls generally erected by this fearful thinking mind that's trying to simply survive based on patterns from our ancestors, you know, amplifying nonsense into infinity. We need to break down those barriers and achieve yoga, achieve union, achieve connection and expansion. So what is the foundation of this sexuality? Well, it begins with the preemptive strike. This is kind of very much ancestral in that sense. You know, this is kind of how our ancestors worked. Like, way back in the day before we even could speak about things. Back with our Neanderthal ancestors. How they would mate with one another. You know, there's this big, strong man, and there's a soft, beautiful woman somewhere out there. He takes his club and whoop-bump, takes her down, and now she's his. That can look pretty dark, you know? A little bit more in the light, it can simply be pursuing someone, you know, or being pursued. Like, oh, wow, look at that. That's coming right after me. Look at you. And so preemptive strike. Whew, what a deep karma that is right there, and can be. Line 2 is shyness. This is a little softer. These are self-imposed barriers. It's not always a bad thing to have a self-imposed barrier. Sometimes it's simply caution, you know? Like, yes, I want something, but, oh, hold on, I don't know. Is this really the one? I don't know. Whoa, back it up. Oh, give me some space. You know, I mean, this is totally okay. This is the nature of what humanity is all about. So we need to break down these barriers, and we also need to know when to build them up. We need to know how to protect ourselves from those who might harm us. And so that's where the second line comes in, this nature of, oh, let me back up a little bit, or maybe I'm time to be bold and look at you, I want you, and I'm going to let you know. You know, shyness or boldness. Over here in the third line, openness. You see that third line of trial and error. This is the material world, after all. This is, anything can happen. What are all the different angles? What are all the different approaches? How could this happen? What if we did like this? What if we were like that? What if we were like this? And what if we were like that? All kinds of different ways. All kinds of different weeds, you know? And so something about this is the third line can hold on to shame. Like, oh, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I was open to that. I can't believe it. Oh my gosh, what'll I ever do? And that's the shadow. There's no need to hold on to your shame. We've all made mistakes in this life. We've all had opportunities to transform mistakes into learning experiences. It's okay to be open in this life. It's how we learn. And so if you listen to your mind amplifying nonsense and transferring your intelligence into nonsense, then you could shame yourself over things that don't matter because other people said it's bad to do it that way. Other people said, oh, I don't do that. How could you? That's wrong. I was told that's bad, so it's bad. And it's nonsense. It's complete nonsense. You're here to learn from your own experiences in this life. And if you can trust your inner authority, then it matters not what these other people say, because you can feel it in your bones. You know who you are. You've been here from the very beginning, and you're here to live your life. So own that. Don't shame yourself because you were open to an experience you discovered didn't belong to you and isn't part of your path going forward. It's okay to learn. Please and thank you. The fourth line is the brotherhood and sisterhood. You see, as we've spoken about before, this fourth line is all about the network. It's all about my friends, my family, my coworkers, my people, my tribe. These are my people. This is the brotherhood and the sisterhood of my people, and even ultimately humanity itself. Where does my mate come from? Well, as a fourth line, hopefully you pick it from your brothers or your sisters. And I don't mean literal genetic brother and sister. I mean the family you've chosen as your family, your network of people, the people around you that live with you, or the people around you that you see from time to time, the people that are important to you. You've developed friendship, you've developed familiarity with them. And sooner or later, that familiarity, pop, might become something different. It might rise up or expand into, whoa, we're really familiar now. We're a little closer than I thought. And it's the nature of it. There's something I want to share here about the fourth line, Ra's statement was never to leave your lover until you found another lover. This fourth line is opportunistic. And so there's a deep importance in being able to strike when the iron is hot and to honor the opportunities that arise in your life. To not judge yourself, to shame yourself, to guilt yourself, or whatever around your behaviors. So long as it's coming from your authority and you've honored your type strategy, you can't go wrong. And even if you do go wrong, it means you actually learn from the experience. You see, this is the difference. The true self learns from their mistakes, and they grow into greater heights towards the culmination of self-actualization and becoming a nurturer. The not-self? Oof. The not-self has an excuse and justification for everything, as I've told you earlier. So beyond this, we have the fifth line, the femme fatale, or the Casanova. You see, this is the fifth line. You see, the fifth line is that exalted line from the classical I Ching. It's always the highest height and the one we all look up to. This is the savior, the amazing, wow, the seducer. Like, look at them. We all want a piece of them. That's the fifth line. And the thing is we either all want a piece of them or we hate them. We need to literally burn them alive. Get them out of here. They are causing problems. And that's the nature of this fifth line. Are they practical or are they causing disturbances? So if you find yourself with that kind of energy around you, my suggestion, be practical. Give yourself a moment if you need. Feel it through. Whatever it is you need to trust within yourself to be with your inner authority, be with it so that you don't become the heretic and you can actually be the savior, that you can actually deliver the goods and you can experience that great height that you know is possible deep down on the inside. Last and certainly not least, we have line 6, which funnily enough is called the one-night stand. This is the tendency, based on personality or circumstances, to accept only temporary unions that may be otherwise impossible or dangerous to continue. You see? You see that right there? This sixth line is the transpersonal reflection, the higher order of the third line. So we can see how perhaps shame might fit into this one night stand. Because boom, there was deep intimacy, there was this closeness for a moment, for a time, that one night, and we cannot continue. No way, no how is not okay. That ain't going to continue. And that doesn't have to be a cause for shame. It doesn't have to be a bad thing at all. You see, there's genetic information exchanged when we mate with each other, whether or not there is offspring produced. There is energetic exchange. Both people are now different. There has been a new experience. And so for the 6 lines who've gone through this experience, I beg of you, do not shame yourself for making, quote, mistakes, unquote. Maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe there was something you needed to learn or to gain or simply to experience to bring the wholeness of your fruition into play. There's so much judgment and guilt and shame around our sexual experiences, and these line 6s, the role models, so long as they're trusting their inner authority and type strategy, so long as they're true to their nature, they don't become the hypocrite. They don't become someone who's causing all kinds of unnecessary problems and dying early, because that can happen. You see this 6th line? That one night stand wherein it may be dangerous to continue, if they know better, because they do, and they continue when it's dangerous, that could be the end, right there. Because they were a hypocrite. And the program, life itself, is no longer interested in hypocrites. We have had enough of them. And we need role models. And that means if you have a one-night stand, accept it, be with it, move on. It's okay to have an experience that's only temporary. It's no big deal. Just be yourself while you're doing it. That's all it takes. So what is this 59-6 here to say yes for? Well, it's here to say yes to get real close. It's here to be with another and make more or not. And so when they're saying yes to the correct intimacies, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, it's joyous. When they're saying yes to the wrong intimacies, they could become mighty upset. Or when they're saying no to the right intimacies, they could be mighty upset. And that can easily become depression. Like, oh, all this fantasy, all this desire, I needed to break down the union and I couldn't do it. I was too shy. Whatever it was that held them back. My prayer is they do not become depressed. That they learn how to move on from the past and not let that past negatively influence their present moment or their future. It's my prayer for all of you. And so overall, what is depression, Well, what I think depression is it's what happens when you're not doing what you're here to do. And when you're not doing what you're here to do for so long that you've lost sight of what you're here to do, that you've forgotten about, that you've given up on what you're here to do, then you become depressed. And it can come from any of those sacral gates and channels. It could come from somewhere else. Basically, I believe it comes from the mind. It comes from the mind amplifying open centers and undefined gates, looking for the other side of the channel to make it feel whole, because it thinks it's missing something. Because it needs to hold on to what's bad for it, because it needs to get rid of the pressure, because it needs to avoid the problems, because it needs to prove its worth to other people, because it needs to receive attention from the world. Because it needs to prove that it's certain about something. Because you know what? It's so very busy being occupied with what doesn't matter without having any idea when enough is enough. And if you're listening to that force, That is the survival ancestor trauma. This was the old school strategic way that we had all these things we were worried about and stressed about and fearful about, and they dominated our lives, and we made sure that we had our fears quenched. At least I'm holding on to this thing that's bad for me because it's something, it's the devil that I'm familiar with, and I know it hurts, and at least I'm familiar with it. At least it'll help get me through. And it doesn't serve. And that's depression, is when that field takes over your life and you're not going where you were born to go within your self-reflected consciousness. You see, it's not even physically about going somewhere. It's not necessarily physically about doing something. It's about reflecting consciousness as you were born to reflect it. And if you're busy trying to succeed where others have succeeded, you might find you fail, because you are meant to succeed where others have failed, and you will find failure where others succeed. And so you don't have to make that into a big deal. It's actually a wonderful thing. It's not this horrible thing. The fact that you have a purpose in this life, that you were born for a reason, and you could easily forget it, and that's okay too. Because you can always remember it. You can always get back in touch with it. I've made my own mistakes in this life. I've had my own learning experiences. I lost access to my inner child. I forgot who I was or why I was here. I had a full-on psychotic break, loss of touch with reality. And then I found myself again. In spite of all that, I was completely lost. And once again, I've been found. And that can happen for each and every one of you. None of us has to go through this life utterly lost and devoid of love. Once we stop looking for the love outside of ourselves, once we accept that we are a passenger inside these vehicles meant to love the difference. Between each and every one of us, there is so much difference, and there's so much that's the same. And if we can honor the sameness, then hopefully we can honor the difference and celebrate the difference. I believe that's why this world is suffering so much. That's why we can feel so depressed, is because we don't celebrate the difference. We push it down. As a society, for the maintenance of the society, we must configure people into clockwork gears so that they will do the job, work in the factory, build the car, go to classes, drink your coffee in the morning, have your alcohol in the afternoons or the weekends, get yourself into this chemically induced stupor, lose sight of what you're here to do, and work the machine. And yet I say no more, because I've had enough. I don't know about you. I'm here for the success where others have failed. And I'm here for the failure where others have succeeded. Because I'm okay with either one. This is my life after all. I'm here to learn. I'm here to grow. I'm here to reflect consciousness in a new way. Because if I can share my gift with you, then I can alleviate a little bit of the suffering on this planet. And if you can share your gift with somebody else, you can alleviate a little bit of the suffering on this planet. And if we can continue that chain going forward on and on and on, there's a lot less suffering on this planet. Because we care, because we're selfish. We care about ourselves first. And that allows us to care about the second, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth, and on and on and on. To each according to their capacity, I love you, and I wish you the very best along your journey in this life. That's about all I have for today. So I thank you very deeply for following along if you've been here the whole time, and I wish you the very best. Take care. Bye for now.
If you have enjoyed the show and would like to learn more about how all of this applies specifically to you, then kindly refer to the link in this video's description, Private Consultation. Here, we can dive into all of the details together in a recorded call. May your signature vibration of satisfaction, success, peace, and surprise find you in a good way.